Welcome. Why are we doing this podcast? There are so many one-offs that we run into within the world of GXP and so many companies where there are some really basic and highly concerning misconceptions about what the responsibilities are within the GXP spaces. We make things harder than they need to be. It is human nature. So let's lighten this up a little, bring some humor and humanity into this, and build the quality framework so that we can focus on the fun parts, making better medicine and devices to improve quality of life for patients. Who are we? Joining me is Jennifer DeMarco. Jen has over 25 years of experience in the life sciences and pharma industry. She worked in quality management roles throughout the entirety of the product life cycle, including a commercial organization that implemented CIA consent decree. She brings a unique perspective. She has a chemistry degree, 2 masters, one in business and the other in quality assurance and regulatory affairs, and is a Six Sigma black belt. She operates where the disciplines of business, science, and operational efficiency converge. Jen has a keen understanding as to how these areas impact one another. This experience, along with her sense of humor, is why she is a key medicine consultant and why I personally wanted to work with her on this podcast.
So, hi, Michelleanne.
Hi.
So, I'm here with Michelleanne Bradley. And Michelleanne has over 20 years of experience in the life sciences and pharma industry. She has worked in clinical settings, pharmacovigilance, IT, quality management, and consulting roles. She has been the safety department of one and also worked for some of the largest pharmaceutical organizations in the world. Her focus within the industry was predominantly in opening lines of communication between internal and external groups. She's interested in working with emerging markets, especially Latin America. She founded Metis in 2016 and has continued to expand the vision and service capabilities ever since. And we are pleased to bring you the Queens of Quality. As you noted earlier, we're here to talk about some of the basic and not so basic aspects of quality and compliance within the pharmaceutical and biotech industries. Our name is intentionally cheeky because although our work is serious, we want to inject a little levity for the balance.
Okay, you know that that's actually the intro that somebody else is going to be doing.
Oh, shit. No, I didn't. Nope,
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah, that's going to be like the intro for
My
all of
bad.
the episodes. So,
Okay.
yeah, we're going to have to cut that part out.
So we can cut that out. Yeah. So so note to the editor, cut
Right.
Jen's part at the end of and service capabilities ever since.
Yes. So we have representation on the east and west coasts of the US, and we also have an international footprint and plans to expand more into emerging markets. So why is this important and why is there a need for these discussions? Because we do make things harder. We make things harder on ourselves.
Human beings are complicated.
We really are. And I like to make the analogy when I'm working with organizations that, we're not trying to build a better Rube Goldberg machine.
Exactly.
Some people get that. Some people don't get that. I prefer it when they get that. If you don't get that, please feel free to look up Rube Goldberg. He's really a pretty cool dude.
He is a cool dude.
So why is there, so Jen, I'm going to ask you, why is this important and why is there a need for these discussions other than that we just really like to make stuff more complicated?
Right. So I know when we throw around this idea of a podcast in general, we're like, okay, should we or shouldn't we? And the question was resolved fairly quickly because one question spurred hours of conversation, which is actually the topic of this particular podcast. And we will get there in a minute as to what the actual topic is, but we were convinced that there was absolutely a need for this because we do make things more complicated. We try to over engineer things when really the simplest answer is generally the right answer. And for us, we've had these conversations, we've had hours and hours worth of conversations for different topics, especially the one that we're going to get to, I promise. And, between the two of us, we have over 50 years of experience. So if you and I are having these conversations, there's a pretty high likelihood so is everybody else. So that's why I want to welcome everyone to the Queens of Quality podcast. We take our work seriously, but not ourselves. Our intention is to bring you helpful information that you can use in your everyday work and have a couple of laughs along the way.
So here we're defining the framework and, with the understanding that we have 3 major points and questions on this topic, and the timing is super important. So the first is the difference between quality and compliance. Jen?
Okay. So, Michelleanne, let me ask you, because I know that this is how our conversation and the need for this podcast actually came about. So, again, we're going to set the baseline for all of our other conversations. And hopefully we have more of them and you come back and listen to those as well. So when you think of quality and or a compliance function, Michelleanne, what does that really mean to you? Like, what is your definition of compliance and what is your definition of quality?
So in our initial discussion on this, when you posed this question, I said that quality is the action and compliance is the output. And in order to be compliant, you have to do something.
Uh-huh.
And Jen, you responded with?
That compliance is the strategy and quality are the tactics that you utilize to execute to that strategy. So I had this one line manager, and when she explained to me that compliance was a verb, I kind of looked at her sideways, kind of like Scooby-Doo, and you get that kind of mode. I was like, what is she talking about? Compliance is a noun, it's not a verb. And she went on to explain that it's because you need to be compliant with something and you have to take, and as you rightly pointed out, that there has to be an action so that you are compliant with it. We'll get into the quality of that action in a minute, but you have to do something in order to actually be compliant. And that's where the idea of the verb, compliance is a verb because it's truly something that you have to do in order to be compliant with something. And that with was even important too, because so often, especially, in certain aspects, and I don't want to get into those because those will be other topics for podcasts. But we really we want to do that scope creep kind of thing, and it's like, what are you really defining yourself as? And what is it that you want to be compliant with?
Right. And so, how do you set that up? How do you how do you start within the organization if we use the same words and they have different meanings? And, where does the level set start?
Mm-hmm.
And, this is really what started the ball really rolling for us was that we had different ideas of what the definitions are of the topic. So being part of quality, and really everyone at every level with every job title within this industry and others, but we're really sticking with this industry. We are all part of quality organization because there is an expectation of quality in what we put in and quality in what we put out.
Yep. I refer to that as the small Q quality because it's everyone's responsibility.
Absolutely.
And so often that is confused with the capital Q quality of the quality department.
Right.
And, it starts with the culture. And I know that so for those of you who don't know me, which is at this juncture, everyone but Michelleanne, I think I talk in pictures, so for me, the framework of like when you build a house, really it's like, okay, you have your plans, you set the foundation, you put the structure in, and you go from there, kind of thing. I know it's an oversimplification. Okay. But for me, like the compliance piece of it ends up being like the architectural plans. And that's, really what you want to work toward, kind of thing. The foundation is your quality organization, your quality culture, your quality manual, your quality policy, whatever that looks like for you. But that's what that foundational piece is, because without that, you're building on a house on a lot of sand. And it gets really sketchy really fast if you don't have an appropriate foundation to build upon. And that's where, I like your comment a lot about the fact that quality is everyone's responsibility. So that foundational piece really needs to be there.
Yes, absolutely. And I also really appreciate that it's, quality is both the foundation that we build on and it's the overarching structure. So sometimes in trying to explain where quality really comes into play and how quality functions, we talk about it as being, the scaffolding, the foundation, all very, building related terminology. Because as we're able, and, we can also use racetrack as the analogy. Like the condition of the track sets the speed that the cars are able to go on the track.
Right.
If the track is all cracked up and filled with gravel and that kind of thing, it's going to have a negative impact on the way that the cars are able to go around the track.
Right.
How the angle of the bank of the sides, that's going to impact the velocity of the cars.
Yep.
So in the same way, if your quality system is kind of jagged, not really smooth, it's going to impact how you can do your job.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. Truly, because again, it's that, if the conditions aren't appropriate, things will go sideways pretty quick.
Yes.
Yeah. So, for me, I'm going to stick to my analogy of the house, right? So you can build it. You mentioned the framework, like you build out your skeleton. You might put in the plumbing. We can say that that's the IT group, because again, it runs through the whole house. So everyone's impacted by IT, right? Or electricity, that type of thing. You need all of those things to make it go, the
Yes.
organization go, right? So you have your foundation, between your plumbing and your electricity, all other things that connect your depending on where you live, you have air conditioning and heating too, you know, that's essentially, I look at that as like the IT group because it touches everything. All of the departments are their own individual rooms kind of thing. And, more than once I've had, people say, "Oh, I just want to take care of my side of the street," type of thing. I want to make sure that my department has everything that they need, which is great in principle. And if you completely remake your kitchen and you don't have a functioning bathroom, that's going to be a problem. So, do you make sure that you have a refrigerator and a stove and a bowl, and then you put the toilet in. And then you put in the countertops and excuse me, the cabinets, then the countertops, because you gotta have the cabinets first. You know,
Foundational first. Yep.
exactly. So like you have to kind of do a little bit at the same time versus making one room absolutely pristine.
Right. So I had that conversation actually when I bought my house, which was a complete fixer.
Hmm.
And my first priority was I gutted it. So my first priority was putting a new roof on it.
Okay.
And I
Yep.
had colleagues who I had one particular colleague who didn't understand why putting in the kitchen wouldn't be the first priority. And I explained to her that the greatest kitchen on the planet is not going to matter if the roof isn't solid.
Right. Yeah.
So even though there are, and I like that analogy as well, of there being separate rooms for each department, even if, those rooms are spectacular,
Hmm.
if there's not a way to link them and for them to work together, you have to have that roof.
Right.
You have to have that roof and you have to also have a solid foundation
Right.
because it it all falls apart
Right.
without
And
structure.
mhm. Yeah, and when you're talking about the roof, of course, I, I'm surprised that they were surprised because having the roof done
Ah,
first
I know where
make
I'm not.
right. I know, like to have the roof done first makes a lot of sense because you don't want to use your kitchen, or excuse me, your sink in the kitchen as a catch pan for your leaking roof, right? And as you're talking about it in terms of, again, kind of sticking with our analogy, I see the leadership organization as the roof.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because if they're not solid and they're not supportive, then it's not going to, it could just rain on in kind of
Right.
thing. And it won't matter how gorgeous your kitchen is
Yeah.
if you don't have a solid roof, because again, it'll get messed up anyway.
Right. So that brings us back around to how this functions within specifically, pharma biotech device organizations that
Hmm.
the quality organization is a part of it.
Right.
So the quality piece is it's integral to the functionality of the organization on a whole as a
Hmm.
whole.
Yep.
The Even in the places that you don't necessarily see it.
Right. Yep. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And with the again, kind of like coming back to that analogy piece, you know, I actually I had somebody once where the the CEO would say they don't believe in, they hire quality people So they don't need a quality department. And I kind of like took a pause. I was like, yes, you want to hire quality people because, and you alluded to this earlier, everyone has responsibility for quality, and when it came down to it, I, made my proposals in terms of these are the things that you need. And essentially, none of it was going to matter because there was no support from the top.
Right.
And when I started to talk things through with the potential client, I was like, I can do all of these things for you. And I can put words on a page and provide tools and those types of things. And none of it's going to matter if the organization at the top does not support it.
Yep.
So I don't feel comfortable wasting your money because it all, those things cost money. And, I ultimately I want to have the work that I'm doing be helpful to you.
Right.
And it was not going to be the case. So, that roof, as we talk about it, was not there, and it wasn't even a sunroof or an atrium
Right.
kind of thing. We're like, they're there, but they're not really present. No, they were actually just not there, kind
Yeah.
of thing.
No,
And
and that is super difficult.
right. Yep.
When, so there does need to be a level of, we're going to actually be in this together. We're actually going to do this stuff. And I know that this is a little bit of a prelude to some of our next episodes, but, if you don't have those pieces, there are severe ramifications down the road from that.
Right. Yep. Agreed. And in various shapes and sizes
Yes.
in terms of the ramifications. So, and one of the things that you had talked about is essentially that almost that it's not necessarily the invisible hand. That's not really what I want to say. It's more that small Q quality, right? It goes through the entirety of the organization, and everyone has this level of responsibility. And one of the things that I think is a real challenge within the organization, within the industry, is the perception that the quality organization is there to police you.
Yes.
And you talked earlier too about getting everybody on board and having everybody like kind of essentially, using a different analogy, paddle in the same direction.
Right. Well, and that made me think of, I worked there was one company in particular that I worked for that they would do anything to create a workaround so that they didn't have to get quality involved. And, for things like validating a report, like, oh, that's going to add, 6 weeks and thousands of dollars to the project when we can make this workaround that basically is, going back to what I said earlier, creating a
Right.
Rube Goldberg machine.
Right.
We can do all of this other maneuvering just to avoid making the straight A to B connection
Yep.
that you would have if you would engage with the other parts of the organization.
Right. And, you talked about, it's going to cost, a little bit of extra money and it's going to delay us by 6 weeks and blah, blah, blah. Well, imagine after you spent 5 years on a project and you're at application and they say, no, you don't have enough data or you don't have the right kind of data. So go back and do another study.
Yep. Yeah.
And then it becomes what? So even though it may seem like, 6 weeks is a tremendous amount, and do not get me wrong, first to market is always best kind of thing. And sometimes you really are competing with someone to the finish line, as I think about we're at the Olympics, right? You
Right.
compete to somebody at the finish line, that matters. What if you don't even show up at the Olympics? Like you may not even be able to get there. So that's where, again, making sure that the right organizations are engaged at the right time are really critical.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay. So
Yes.
takeaways from today:
Okay.
quality and compliance. Different people have different definitions, different ideas about what quality is, what compliance is,
Hmm.
how they work together.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't have to agree, but there should be an understanding.
Absolutely. And you may not necessarily, to your point, have the same definition, but know what that is for your organization.
Yes.
And what does your organization need to do? And
Yeah.
how do you all agree as to what your quality organization does, what your compliance organization does, and how individuals are responsible to be compliant with the regulatory requirements or the laws for their area of expertise and produce at a high quality so that you don't have to repeat it.
Yes. We're going to talk about that part some more for sure.
Absolutely.
So thank you for joining us today. I hope you had some good takeaways from today's talk.
And during future episodes, we will absolutely do a deeper dive into what the value proposition is for your quality and compliance organizations.
Yes. And if you have any additional questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us at Metis Consulting Services. And we'll talk to you again soon.